Good afternoon, everyone. Glad you could join us today. This session will be on tuning to your baby because babies don't come with an instruction manual. And it's a book I recently wrote. I still practice as a health visitor. Um, and I'll share some insights from the book and the rationale for writing the book and how you and your clients can benefit from the book. Okay, so we'll start with a brief overview. I'll say a bit about me, my vision and mission for writing the book, rationale for writing the book, about tuning to your baby, who the book can benefit, and how the book can benefit you. And I will entertain some questions at the end. Okay, so a bit about me. My name is Ruth Oshikanlu, and I'm a nurse, midwife. I used to be a family nurse. I still practice as a health visitor and I'm a life coach. I'm a single parent and I am passionate about parenting. Every day I learn something new as a parent. Parenting is often handed down, and this is one reason why I'm passionate about parenting, because if you don't have good enough parenting, that's what you hand down. And if you do have good parenting, that's what you hand down too. So we tend to practice as parents what we learned growing up from our parents. But my belief is that good enough parenting is the best gift anyone can give their child. That really matters because that's what's going to be handed down. If it's good enough, then it's handed down. A bit about me. I'll just quickly whiz through my career history, how I got to publishing the book. In 1990, I did drop out of medical school after 2 years. I just realised it wasn't for me. I was able to do it, but I just didn't enjoy it. And then I came into nursing. I did other things. I toyed around with other things. And then in 1993, I started Project 2000 Nursing. I finished the training. That I didn't drop out of. And then I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So at the time, they were piloting this rotational post. So I got a job as a staff nurse at King's, and I took a 1-year rotational post where after 3 months you rotated. I just wanted a taste of everything I'd enjoyed as a midwife. And but I still didn't enjoy it after a year. So in 1997, I started my midwifery training. It's an 18-month degree program, so I completed it in March 1999. I worked on labour ward for 6 months because I kind of had a passion for the community. But in order to get a job as a community midwife, you had to work 6 months on labour ward before you were ready for the community. So after I finished my 6 month stint on labour ward, I did get a job as a community midwife. And I did that for a while and really enjoyed it. And in 2003, because at the time was when we started testing every pregnant woman for HIV, I applied for an HIV role and I got an HIV specialist midwife job. And then in 2005, I had a baby in 2004 because I didn't want to do shift work. Although I wasn't doing shifts as an HIV midwife, I moved house. So I thought, actually, I've always wanted to be a health visitor. So I embarked on my health visiting training, which lasted a year. So in September 2006, I completed that. And worked as a health visitor for 6 months. And this is when the FNP, the Family Nurse Partnership, the Department of Health were piloting the Family Nurse Partnership program, and I got a job as a family nurse in one of the first pilot sites. After a couple of years in the role, I left FNP to train as a life coach, and I really enjoyed coaching. And so in 2010, I set up a coaching consultancy. And in 2012, I decided to publish a book to put all what I'd learned to benefit parents. But I just wanted to highlight something, just going back over the journey, starting in when I dropped out of medical school, and just to learn that it's not necessarily what you drop out of, it's what you drop into that matters. Because sometimes when we find we drop out of something, we feel like a failure. But it's not necessarily the dropping out, it's what you go into, what you go into. And we know so many people who've dropped out of school and they are successful today. Okay, so I'll move on to my vision. I'll just share my vision with you. A world where every parent embraces and enjoys their role as parents, despite its many challenges, meeting the needs of their child or children, without sacrificing their needs. And I believe that most people want to parent well, regardless of the situation that they find themselves in. I'm also of the opinion that every parent is an expert in their circumstances. And this is my vision. Having met so many people who parent poorly or good enough, actually those who parent poorly still do want to parent well. They just don't know how to do it. And a lot of people who are parents, sometimes they do that at their own expense. So it's a way of, meeting your needs whilst enjoying, parenting. And my mission is to use my passion for empowering women to raise their babies and my proficiency in enabling them to find their solutions to enjoy being parents and succeed in parenting. And with some insight into why babies act the way they do, I believe that every parent can tune into their baby, find out what they need, meet them, and enjoy parenting. So it's about ensuring, as parents, your needs are met, but as your baby's needs too are met, and that both of you enjoy it. You enjoy parenting, and your baby does enjoy being parented by you. So that's my mission. So this is the book, and this is what it looks like, the front and back cover. And it was published last year. So why did I decide to write a book? There's so many books out there. Well, having worked as a family nurse, I learned so much about the neurological development of the infant. So with all this evidence, realizing the first 2 years of life are crucial, I felt the need to share this with parents and with practitioners who didn't know this. Also, there's a book written by Sue Gerhardt. It's called Why Love Matters, How Affection Shapes a Baby's Brain. And this book kind of shows the impact of neglect on a baby's brain and why love indeed is essential for that relationship between a parent and an infant. And then the relationship between early brain development and outcomes later in life. So the first few years, pregnancy and the first 2 years of life are crucial. And that's the reason, based on the evidence, I felt the need that most parents need to know this, so that they can they can use this in parenting their infants. At the time of writing the book, I worked on the Isle of Dogs. Oh, there's a missing slide. I worked on the Isle of Dogs, and I don't know if you know London very well. It's in the East End of London, and it was a very funny caseload because it is an interesting place to work because there were two, I don't know, yes, that's it. So that's the Isle of Dogs, and it's the little loop on the River Thames, and I had a mixture of clients. So, and both had their needs. So in the middle you had the very deprived clients, and on the outside, all the river properties, there were loads of affluent mothers who too had their needs. They were quite vulnerable as well. And it was so difficult to design services to meet the needs of the clients, to satisfy the needs of both clients. And so it was based on that I wrote the book. Another reason I wrote the book was because of the questions parents often asked. So mothers in clinic will turn up asking loads of questions, and this was just an indication of their worry and anxiety about parenting, especially first-time parents. They always wanted to get things right. It's always like they didn't want to make any mistakes. They also had experienced conflicting advice from professionals when they were pregnant or when they had their babies. Midwife would give them advice, and then we will tell them something different, and they ended up confused. There was also a gap in service provision. So it was a response to clients' needs. Clients kind of felt they did ask for, it would be nice to have a manual, It's a shame baby wasn't born with a manual. So I thought, actually, if I make a DIY toolkit that they can work with, based on the evidence they're getting, they can complete these tools whilst they were pregnant or after they've had their babies, and get them to enjoy parenting. And then there was one day I had where all three mums I had seen at the new birth visits, they were all in tears, having read this book called The Contented Baby. And up until then, I had heard the book, but I had not read it myself. So I decided to go to the library and get a copy of the book, and I was surprised the advice contained in the book, and said, well, no wonder the women were in tears. It was a very prescriptive approach to parenting. So I decided I got to find a solution. So, and because we had clinics, they were so busy with people coming to clinic, they would have a list of 10, 20 questions. And I felt, there is a gap. They need this information. So I decided to write the book as if they always had access to the health visitor. Like, if they came with a problem, the advice I would give based on the evidence and what they can do, to actually write a book that contained this. So every time, rather than coming to clinic, they will feel like, okay, actually I can pick the book and work through the issues. And the other part of the book, I'll talk about it in more depth later, the manual. They actually do things, because people learn more by doing rather than just giving advice. If someone gives you advice, then you enact, you act based on their advice, and that's actually where the learning comes and where you find your solutions. So that's one of the reasons for writing the book. And then I wrote it also based on my experiences of parenting. Having had a very difficult pregnancy, I was hospitalized, despite being a midwife. I was hospitalized for 5 months. And it was the learning, growing, and healing from that difficult pregnancy experience. I thought, I need to capture this, because I'm sure there's so many other women like this that can benefit from learning how to manage when things don't go the way you planned them to go. And then also, despite being a midwife and having so much knowledge, how unprepared I was to become a parent. And then learning from parenting how hard it is to parent. I got to this moment, if I had to do all again, what would I do different? So I wanted to capture that in a book. So, based on all my learning as a nurse, as a midwife, as a family nurse, a practicing health visitor, a life coach. In life coaching, I learned so many skills. New NLP, that stands for Neuro Linguistic Programming, motivational interviewing, transactional analysis, things like the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, visualization. I wanted to incorporate all this. Then my learning as a single parent, and then putting the passion into the book. So sharing my insights, both personal and professional. So I thought, I'm going to pack everything into it, because I'm sure it's going to be of benefit to parents. And that's what I did. So about the book does focus on pregnancy to age 4. The book has 6 chapters, 6 big chapters in it, and the chapter headings are phrases I used in pregnancy or as a parent. And as I talk through the book, you would see, you probably may relate to some of it yourself. So every chapter does end with a section sharing my learning, and it just has snippets of the main things I've learned as a professional and as a parent. There's 2 parts of the book. So the first part talks about the research evidence, including some of my experiences, professional and personal. And the second part is a baby manual, because people don't have a baby manual. Actually, there's a toolkit to prepare your manual, because it's through learning and action that you actually grow and gain confidence. So we'll start with chapter 1. So chapter 1 is entitled I Didn't Plan for This, and includes my difficulties and my experiences of a difficult pregnancy. So I went for my 20-week scan midway through pregnancy, and unfortunately everything went pear-shaped. I talk about finding out one is pregnant, how you tell others, because the reaction that others, the way you react to being pregnant and the reaction you get from people you tell, the closest people to you, sometimes can affect the way you relate to your pregnancy. The importance of positive thinking, especially when things don't go as planned, how the brain works, I talk about when you think positively and when you think negatively, how one can manage, themselves, because there's so many things out of one's control in pregnancy, but that you could definitely manage your mind, you can manage your expectations, and you can manage the setbacks. And the key learning from this is that if you can control it, the next thing is to try and influence it. But if you can't do either of the two, then just accept it and just plan your strategy. So I talk about all the stresses I went through when I was pregnant. I was studying, moving house, changing jobs, and I was doing all this whilst growing a baby. And this is what we find a lot of our clients do. Although we may not see them that early in their pregnancy, most people, health visitors that do offer an antenatal contact, you would find, they've just moved or they're changing jobs because they're starting to think about life with a baby, but forget that all these things they're doing could be stressful and can affect their pregnancy and the way the baby is growing in utero. Chapter 2 focuses on who are you, and it's about getting to know the baby as the baby's growing in utero. So the focus is on a normal pregnancy, but from the baby's perspective, we often talk about things from our experience, but forget that the baby too has feelings. And one of the principles I use, I don't know if you know about Steve Covey, one of his 7 principles, 7 successful habits, is to seek first to understand, then to be understood. So if one can try and experience what the baby is going through, only then can one understand baby's feelings. And then I focus on the baby's brain development in the womb and how to positively influence it. So if you're trying to see things through baby's eyes, then one can understand the rationale for their behavior and then know how to respond to them, connecting with the baby, because there's millions of neurons or nerve cells in the brain, and these need to make connections, because if they don't make those connections, they're pruned or lost. So how to ensure that those neural pathways, that they're properly developed. And even though you can't see your baby, there's so many things you could do. You could look at your bump, you could listen, and you could feel. So you can start, communicating with the baby in utero, talking to baby, listening, observing for responses. And it's kind of the opportunity a woman has to trial run, and start parenting even from pregnancy. Imagine what life will be once one has a baby. So a woman will get the tools to start planning for the baby, what she may gain, what she may lose, how she will cope with parenting, and just to start getting the mindset ready to prepare and enjoy motherhood. So that's what chapter 2 focuses on. Then chapter 3 is for after the birth of the baby. And it's entitled, I've had the baby, what do I do next? And it's helping a parent helping the baby to adapt to life outside the womb. So woman's had labor, she's had the baby, and is trying to revisit things from the baby's point of view. Women would tell you about their labor, it was hard, it was tough, but have they actually imagined how the labor process was for the baby from the baby's point of view? How hard life is for the baby outside the womb? Because once a parent or woman knows this, then she can start to think of what she could do to make it better. I discuss about the baby cues and the baby states, so how a baby communicates to a parent without language. I talk about sleep, why they need to sleep, and how that impacts on how feeding impacts on sleep, and then understanding what a baby does using the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And celebrating and enjoying motherhood, because it's important to enjoy it if you're going to be good at it. So chapter 3 is kind of trying to replicate, and I'll share some tools later. I think I've got about 5 tools I'll talk through to help with parents. Then chapter 4 is when things don't go as planned. It's wow, no one said it would be this hard. And in this chapter, I burst the myth of perfect parenting. You know, how to be content with being just good enough. Because sometimes we actually create our problems wanting to be perfect. And we set ourselves up to fail. I talk about most of the learning we do actually comes through failure. I discuss the cycle of learning. I don't know if you've heard about the cycle of learning. So you first start with unconscious incompetence. So you don't even know that you don't know. And I'll go through the cycle later on. Then you move on to conscious incompetence. So you know you don't know. You're now aware that you don't know. Then you move on to conscious competence. You know that you know. Eventually you move on to unconscious competence. You don't know that you know. And I'll talk through the cycle of learning in relation to breastfeeding. I do discuss transaction and analysis because it's the woman's baby. So, you know, be an adult about decision making, because a lot of the stresses as a parent come from trying to please others. Oh, my mum said she did this. Everyone becomes an advisor when one becomes a parent. But there is no harm in taking the advice, but you don't have to enact. You don't need to, you know, actually use the advice you're giving. So I do empower women that, look, it's your baby. You call the shots. You decide what you do. I get a woman to appreciate that your baby's unique. You know, don't compare. We often will find women who come to clinic and compare. Oh, my friend's baby is on so centile. Mine is only on this. Actually, it's your baby. Your baby's unique. Then I talk about guilt, because another thing we women struggle with, especially, is guilt when it comes to parenting. And that guilt in itself is not a bad thing if you use it. If you're doing something is making you feel guilty, then ask yourself, actually, do I need to change course? You know, so guilt can make, maybe if you're not spending as much time with your children as you ought to, or you feel you ought to. Actually, guilt can be a good sign, but only if you use it. But if you're not going to use it, if you're just going to be feeling guilty needlessly, then actually lose it. Don't use it. And then I talk about time management, and this is where I use the Pareto principle. It's the 80-20 rule, and get the woman to plan her day. And, you know, because when you plan for the best day you're going to get, you're more likely to get it. So that's chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the toddler years. That's the focus. And it's entitled Help My Baby's Mutated, because and this came from, my son was such a lovely boy, and he still is a lovely boy, but he became a toddler, had loads of energy, and then was a shock. I didn't know how to manage him. So this is just the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this explains from a baby stage all the way to toddlerhood. When a baby's born, they're totally dependent on their parents, and the first thing is survival. The first priority is survival outside the womb. So the focus is on feeding, keeping them warm, helping them breathe, and sleep, because they grow in their sleep. Then they move on to the next stage, feeling of safety. So protect me, help me feel safe and secure. Eventually they go on to the next stage of the triangle. They need to be loved and to belong. So the parents' goal is to show their care and to love them abundantly. Then they move on to the next stage. I need to feel good about myself. And so this is where they're a bit independent, but the parent still has to get them to explore safely. Once they get on their feet and they feel independent, their need is to feel free. And so their role is to promote independence in the toddler. The toddler years, so I talk about what the toddler years are, because this is another time when parents do report feeling, it's really hard to manage. On focusing some key problems in the toddler years, things like fussy eating, sleeping problems, tantrums, potty training, why it happens and how to manage them, in communicating with the toddler, because sometimes it could be hard. One at that time, we parents always say no, 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 but the toddler seems not to want to respond to that, and how to promote speech. So, as I said in the previous slide, there really is no point saying no to a toddler. So, I talk about how the toddler responds to communication and how best to communicate with the toddler. So, there's no point saying no. Then there's a whole big section of what kind of parent are you. There's four main types of parent. The authoritative parent. Oh, sorry. The first one should be authoritarian parent, who is very controlling. The permissive parent, there's no boundaries at all. Then the passive parent, and this is kind of almost bordering on neglect. The child just does whatever they want. There's no boundaries. But what one wants to achieve is being an authoritative parent. So you're firm, but you also let the child, have their way sometimes. But you're in control, but not all the time. Managing toddler behavior and how to not forget yourself, so you love and manage yourself. Because when mums feels relaxed, then the parenting is better. How to love one's toddler, and then the sharing my learning section. Then I'll move on to chapter 6, and this is the section that contains the manual, putting it all to practice, and it highlights the importance of taking action. And I use this equation, the be plus do equals have. Whoever we're being at any time plus whatever we're doing gives us the results we get. So whatever we want to change, we need to ask myself, who am I being? Am I managing my state? Am I doing what I need to do? And then that gives you the results. So like a parent now, who wants a child to learn to sleep independently? Are they being strong enough to be firm with the child? Are they ensuring they have a good bedtime routine, and they're, ensuring the child is learning to sleep independently? If they don't do it, then of course they're not going to be successful at it. So chapter 6 is putting it all into practice. And then this is where you have the baby manual. It's actually the appendix of the book. And throughout the book, there's that little icon. So they'll read a bit of theory, and then they'll get the icon, and it refers them to the relevant section of the appendix or the baby manual, because in the toolkit, and they've got exercises there that enables a mother to tune into her baby from conception to toddlerhood. So throughout, they have this bit there, the work to do, and I'll talk through some examples. So I'll just share a few tools from the baby manual. So the first one I'll share, and I often use this at the new birth visit with my mums. Feel your baby's journey to the world. And so there's a big section there that says, your baby's journey to the world was a stressful one. Try to step into your baby's shoes. Imagine what it felt like for your baby as he or she navigated his or her way down the birth canal. So they have to do the work. And then the questions that are asked. So woman steps into the baby's shoes. They're upside down in the uterus. Contraction after contraction after contraction. So the woman is feeling pain, but so is the baby. Unfortunately, the woman does understand what she's going through, but the baby doesn't. So, and then there's a section there. What kind of labor did you have? So did she have a normal delivery? It's going to be different from if a baby had a cesarean section or an instrumental delivery. So was it a vacuum or was it forceps? Imagine how it was for the baby as your baby was being born. So it says, considering the type of birth you had, what do you think your baby's journey may have felt like for him or her? So get the woman to actually start tuning into what the baby's feeling. How do you feel about what your baby might have experienced? Because it's important for the woman to experience this so she can understand how to relate to the baby. And then what will you do about it? So baby, obviously, if it was a stressful birth, baby's stressed. So baby's crying. So it's nothing they're doing for their baby. Because the woman's focusing, then she can start to develop some empathy for her baby. So if baby's crying, then they realize it's not necessarily what they're doing or not doing, but just baby recovering from this stressful experience. Baby's had a hard time being born, and baby's crying, trying to recover from the experience. So it's nothing that she has done wrong. Then I get them to mimic the womb outside the womb. So I say, your baby was very comfortable inside your womb. Now the baby's outside the womb, life is very different. Baby would love to go back, but that can't happen. To aid baby's transition to life outside the womb, it is important to try to mimic the conditions of the womb for baby. So I get the woman now to do the hard work. So every time there's a question, they got like a whole page to write all the things. So the question is, how will you try to recreate the conditions baby is used to in utero? So how would you try and replicate the conditions outside the womb? So she has to do the work. So if baby was cuddled up, she'll have to give more cuddles. It was warm, baby was hearing mom's heartbeats, so put baby on the chest, just to make that transition for the baby outside in the first few weeks of life. Another thing I talk about is the learning cycle. So, as I said earlier, parenting is all about learning. So when we first start, we're totally unconscious of what we know. We don't even know what we don't know. We don't know that we don't know it. So a woman now starts to breastfeed, and then she realizes, oh goodness, I have no clue. I'm totally clueless about breastfeeding. Then she moves to level 2. Now she knows that she gets that awareness that actually I don't know as much as I need to know. Then she moves on to level 3, conscious competence. So with some information, she learns how to breastfeed, and now is talking aloud, or put the baby to the breast, swaddle the baby, feed for so many minutes, So she's competent, but she's still talking herself through it because she's learning, and she's changing as she's learning, until the point baby masters breastfeeding, mother masters breastfeeding, and they don't even think about it. It's second nature. They gain mastery on how to breastfeed. So often we would learn how not to do things before we learn how to do it. And this is why mistakes are crucial. Mistakes are part of learning. And it's no big deal when you make a mistake, as long as it doesn't have a disastrous consequence. Actually, it's through mistakes we learn. And so the thing though with parenting is, the minute you master one thing, you master breastfeeding. Before long, your baby's ready to be weaned. So you start the cycle all over again. So, with breastfeeding, applying those principles of the learning cycle, what skill are you trying to learn? So this is just with breastfeeding, but there's so many skills a parent would learn in the first few months. So with breastfeeding, what skill are you trying to learn? So it's breastfeeding. Do you feel you have enough information about breastfeeding? So the woman has to answer this question to herself. If not, what information do you require? Is it how to position, how to latch your baby on, how to tell your baby's full, and so on and so forth? And then who can help you get it? So where are the sources of support? Do you feel confident in breastfeeding? Do you feel competent in breastfeeding? Are you conscious about it? And are there any other insights? So as parents learn, they go through these questions every time to see what stage they are on the learning cycle. So if they're not conscious and they're competent and they're confident, they're probably masters of breastfeeding. So that's how to apply the learning cycle to breastfeeding. Then I'll share another tool. It's managing my feelings, and this kind of helps a woman gain control over her feelings. So this box is there. I just cut that out from the book. So each day for 1 week, put an X in a box that represents your highest feeling towards the top and your lowest feeling towards the bottom. So they have to pick out what their highest feeling was and what their lowest feeling was. And obviously there's a range of feelings there: balanced, happy, content, anxious, hopeless, helpless, guilty, afraid, sad, tearful, depressed, angry, wanting to hurt myself. Oh, I've repeated that twice. Suicidal, and any other feelings that are not covered there. And you would notice there's a little asterisk there. It says if you experience any of these feelings, then please read the section entitled Important Notice. And with those things, depressed, wanting to hurt myself, suicidal, you just signpost them immediately to where they can get support if they're feeling depressed, free sources of support. And obviously they can always call their health visitor too, or go to the GP. So managing my feelings, so that you've got that box, and then these are the questions that are underneath the box. And with these questions, they got gaps within the book to actually write how they're feeling. So what brings you down? What lifts you up? Every day, what helps your feelings become balanced, happy, or contented? So what do you do that helps you? So if it's exercising, if it's a lovely bath, if it's talking with your partner. So once they start to realize the things that help them be happy, then they can do more of it. And what do you think you could do to keep your feelings balanced? So, to sustain it. If you require help managing your feelings, where and when will you seek it? So it just helps a woman start to develop her resourcefulness. So that's another tool in the book. So I've just shared a few tools. So who the book can benefit. The book is, I found, useful. Many first-time parents who bought it and used it find it of benefit. Also, anxious parents, because sometimes a parent is doing all the right things, but they don't have that confidence, which induces some anxiety in them. Or parents who've had a long gap between their children. So one of the women that bought the book said, oh, she'd forgotten, because before she had this kid, her youngest was 12, so she'd forgotten all what she did the last time round. So they also can benefit. Health visitors and health visiting students can benefit as well. Midwives, I think one of the regrets I have is not working as a midwife after being a parent, because I think I would have taken that preparing for parenting role more seriously. Often we prepared women for labour, but not necessarily to parent after the baby was born. Nursery nurses can have found the book useful as well, to be able to manage tantrums and toddler behaviour. And family support workers who are based in children's centres have found it of benefit. And how the book can benefit clients? Well, it enables the client to become resourceful and tap into their internal resources. Even before we became parents, one has so many skills that are transferable, but only if you tap into them would you realize that actually I do have those skills. And less dependency on professionals, because when a parent is going on and acting on the book and the advice contained in the book, then it makes them they get the results and they get less dependent on professionals. Improve confidence in their parenting ability. Many parents are competent, but they don't realize they're competent. They don't feel confident. And then it encourages the client to become empowered by taking action. Nothing will change unless one takes action. If we want to move something forward, we need to take action. So that's how it can benefit clients. How it can benefit professionals. It provides a toolkit to use with clients spanning pregnancy to age 4. So there's several tools in the book. Half of the book is a toolkit. So, you could share those tools with parents or with expectant mothers to do the work. It's evidence-based and it contains lots of coaching tools that we may not have been taught as health visitors. There's so many tools, motivational interviewing, all those, transaction and analysis that we're not necessarily taught as part of our health visiting program. So it all is contained in them. It's useful for health visiting students that do not have a community background or if they're not parents themselves. And it's less dependency on professional. It just frees us up to focus on the more pressing issues. We know we all have to balance our caseloads and do the safeguarding work. We sometimes can find it challenging managing parents who are overly anxious. So if they go on and do the work, then at least it frees us up to do the safeguarding role. And obviously the whole aim is for the mum to be confident, and a confident mother is a happier baby. So, and our aim as health visitors is to enable mothers to give babies the best start in life and create healthier communities. So when a baby's healthier, then over time there will be a healthier community. And hopefully when mum's happy and baby's happy, then hopefully health visitors are happy too. How the book can be used. Parents can use the book independently, so they can work through the book themselves. The tools in the appendix can be used to work with specific issues with parents. So if, as we're profiling our caseloads, we notice that there is a need, so people are having sleep problems, want to run a sleep clinic, potty training, fussy eating, colic, a lot of colicky babies. So the tools can be used to do specific work with parents. Also, preparing parents for their roles, their parenting roles. So antenatal programs could be run, not just preparing for labor, but preparing for that role as a parent. Are you planning to breastfeed? How are you going to cope when it's hard? How much do you know about breastfeeding? Where are you going to get the knowledge and the support? So we could run parenting programs and in the antenatal period and after the birth of the baby. So the book can be used to run targeted group sessions, weaning, managing sleep problems, managing fussy eating, managing tantrums. These are just a few examples. So that's kind of a bit about the book and how the book can be used. I was wondering if anyone had any questions. And if one wants some more information, that's those two websites, www.tuningtoyourbaby.co.uk and tuningtoyourbaby.com, and an email address there if one has any other questions, and there's a phone number there. If you go to the tuningtoyourbaby.co.uk, you can actually download the first chapter and the contents of the book free of charge. So, want me to read it? Okay. And so there's just some information about the CPD. So if you go to the website http www.communitypractitioner.com, there's a CPD module, and you can complete it. You'll be able to access it next week. And how to stay in touch and keep up to date with the with Unite. That's the website, www.unitetheunion.org/health. Make sure your membership's up to date, and those are the numbers